Hi everyone, it's Brittany here to bring you my October wrap-up. As you can see, this month I managed to read 3 books. This was one of the busiest months of my existence, and I feel pretty proud that I got this one finished for sure. And that I was able to read these 2 in between as well. The 3 books that I read in the month of October are Bitter Orange, which was kindly sent to me by Tin House, I Am Still Alive, which I bought on a whim and recommendation from a few other booktubers. And then last but certainly not least was A Little Life, which how I'm going to explain all of my feels in this video, I don't know. I'm just going to talk about them in the order that I read them, and the first that I read was Bitter Orange. I was really excited about this even before it got to me. I've never read anything by Claire Fuller before, but I have heard really good things. In going into this, I was really anticipating strong writing, which is exactly what I got. There have been mixed reviews out there for this book. I personally really enjoyed it. I feel like it's not really one, typically I'm a person that connects to characters, and this isn't really one that did that for me. It was really about the type of just really lovely descriptive writing that she did, and just some of the intrigue about the dynamics of the 3 characters' relationship. I feel like that sort of triangulation relationship is something that is really frightening to me. I started this one for its more ominous, creepy vibes and definitely got that. It's not like throughout the whole book, but there is this sort of tone of like, oh, something's just not right. And I really liked that. The end though, the end is the reason you'll read this book. You gotta, if you're like midway through and you're like, should I finish? You should finish. Please do that because you'll be happy that you did. The next book I read, which was my break book while reading A Little Life, because I read A Little Life all of October. I started October 1st and I finished the 30th. And because A Little Life is so heavy, I had to read in between. Like, I'd pause after a really heavy part and read like a few chapters out of this book, which, I mean, could have been a lighter, more light-hearted decision on my part, but I went with this one because I also didn't want to stray too far from like the October vibes I was going for. This was actually a really pleasant surprise for me. I've never read a YA told from like a survivalist standpoint, and to me it didn't read like a typical YA. I mean, it still was, but there was just a little bit more behind it that I felt really did the story justice. I really love the main character, Jess. I feel like her strength throughout the book was something that I really held on to throughout and was the only thing she was holding on to throughout. She's essentially in the middle of nowhere in, I believe, Alaska. It's either Alaska or Canada. It's in Canada. She's in the middle of nowhere and is only with her and her father's dog and has to just figure it out, and that's terrifying. Some of the stuff that goes on I feel like is pretty intense, but tolerable until the end. The end is hard, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it because I was sobbing at the end, and that was unexpected, especially because like the whole book I was like so with her and so with everything, and then was sobbing at the end. So also be prepared for that. I want to say why, but it's such a spoiler that I absolutely can't. So I'm sorry, but if you want to like message me, I can tell you why if you don't mind like being spoiled, but it is a spoiler and it's awful and I don't want to think about it now because I'll cry now. Speaking about crying now, oh, this little one. It's been a while since I've read a book of this size, so committing to this was frightening for me, and knowing how heavy it is, I didn't realize how much trauma I was in for going into this. I knew and I know that like when every single person's response is like, oh my gosh, that's so heavy, it's so emotional, I'm sobbing even thinking about it. Things like that were constantly said on any Instagram posts I had about this. So I knew like there's something that's like generalizable enough to where everyone is left feeling that way. I'm a person that reads a lot of heavy and emotional reads on the regular, and they usually are pretty traumatic. This is by far the deepest, heaviest read that I've ever read. It has easily snuck its way up to my favorite spot. The friendships in this book are unlike anything I've ever read before. It's hard. I think I can make a whole video on this book, so I'm just gonna go over like my brief version of that. If you see me in person, it will not be brief and I will likely freak out. To me, it was the friendships that immediately grabbed me, because I had a really hard time in the beginning following who was being talked about or like who we were covering at that point. And it wasn't until about like 200 pages in that I felt like I've got a good grasp on everything. I like could follow it. It was just a little bit harder, mostly because I had to keep taking breaks, just because life was busy. But definitely worth it. I feel like the friendships are what initially got me really hooked, and then the depth of those friendships, and then built on relationship aspects. I feel like, to me, like Jude, Willem, Andy, Harold, like are stuck with me for forever is how I feel walking away from this book. And I had just recently filmed like the Finally Fall reading tag where I talked about how like if I could be a part of any friend group, it would be this one. That rings true now more than ever. I don't know, I just haven't had a book that like I have felt like so connected and impacted by that it's hard to articulate how much this book meant to me. And like it was with me all of October, which was a really hard month for me. This book made me feel like maybe it's not as hard as it could be. What's hard is this book will and has been really, really hyped, but I do want to put out there that you should, and I think have to, wait for the right time. Don't just like see that everyone's reading it and just jump on and jump right in. It feels like it will be fine. I think you should prepare for it. I think that if you know that you're not in the mental state to take on something that is really heavy and really hard to hold, don't do it. There's no rush. It will still be there. You will be able to find a copy somewhere. I think that taking care of yourself is and always should be what comes first, and then take on something that has this magnitude of depth and trauma, just because vicarious trauma is real, and it can happen through a book, and it can bring up a lot of your own past experiences. That's like one of the biggest things I feel, because I feel so strongly connected to this book, that I don't want to mislead anyone in feeling like, oh, this is one you can just pick up and start. You just have to commit to it. It's the type of commitment that you have to give to it that is really challenging. So just be warned with that, but also if you do feel like you're in the space to read it, I do highly recommend it. I think it is, it's quite a treasure, and I know that she's written other books, and I think it's gonna take me a minute, but I would really like to explore that one too. All right, these are my 3 books for the month of October. I feel really glad about these being my 3. It just felt right. So really good month for reading, and I'm really excited to talk about some of the other books coming up in November too. So that video is coming up soon, and other than that, that's all I've got. If you've read any of these or you want to talk about them, please leave comments below. Let's chat, especially if it's about a little life. I am more than happy to process that. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.